What's it gonna take for you to finally break up with your bullshit? Think what you could do if you could only break up with your bullshit. Hello and good morning. It is a rainy Monday in New Jersey, and I just got up and I can't stop thinking about all of the conversations I had yesterday. I recorded 4 episodes of the podcast, and the first one was with my friend Visa from Twitter. His handle is Visakan, Visakanv, and he is a creator. I say he's a creator of community and ideas. So he has somehow, and we'll discover a bit of how in this episode, he has found a way to create a community of people on Twitter who have interesting, deep, meaningful discourse and kind discourse as well. He's actually, I didn't say this to him yesterday, but he's one of the reasons that I'm still on Twitter, because there's a lot of nonsense there and there's not a lot of substance or that adds value. There's a lot of fighting and just silly things. And what I find is that anything he posts, first of all, it always makes my brain tingle, anything that he says. And then if you open up the thread and look at the comments, there's conversation happening and sharing happening that I don't find anywhere else. And it's almost a foregone conclusion that anyone who's following him is probably someone that I would like to have a conversation with. And he's actually created this community in a way where there are people who will gather as friends of Visa, because they just assume they'll all be cool people, and then they are. So I think he's a bit of a unicorn on the internet, and he's got about 25,000 followers, which is a really decent following that he has organically built over time. And I think he could have a lot more, but it's also kind of perfect that he doesn't, because he prunes his following often. He's constantly training people how he wants to be interacted with, and here's what we do here on my Twitter, and not in an arrogant way, and just like, hey, this is what I'm actually here for. And I'm not here for that sort of discourse. And he's really, really brilliant. And he's a lot of different creative things. He's a writer. He plays guitar. We'll get into all of it on the podcast. So without further ado, here's my interview with Visa. Break up with your bullshit. So hello.
Hi.
Welcome, Visa.
Good to be here.
I told you yesterday I'm not gonna attempt to pronounce your name. I'm just gonna call you Visa, because that's all I ever call you.
Yes, Visa is good.
Okay, good.
Nice.
Can you tell people where you're joining us from?
All right, so I'm in Singapore right now. It's like 1 a.m. and yeah, I'm in my house alone. Well, my cat's over there, but yes.
So you, when I thought that this was going to be a really hard podcast to schedule, and then you're like, yeah, no, I'm a night owl, or I'm up. Like, why? Why does your sleep schedule?
So there could be multiple reasons. So even when I was like a teenager, I think I used to stay up late all the time because I live in a very crowded house with my family back then when I was a kid. And so the nighttime was kind of when I could have my own space to do my own thing, like go online or whatever. But even after I left home, I found that I guess I just like quiet hours. And you can either do that really early or really late. And I just have the habit of staying up late. And yeah, I don't know, there could be a bunch of, it's probably not healthy. I do remember when I traveled to California, I thought I would have jet lag, but I didn't. And I actually slept normal hours while I was there. And then when I came back, I thought, okay, I now know that I can sleep normal hours. So let's try and reset it. But then it didn't work out for some reason. So I'm once again a nocturnal being.
Yeah. Do you find that you're, I can say I find that my creative muse is, I think there's squadrons of them. They really like the early morning. And
Yeah.
I probably used to get there by staying up late, and now I'm a mom, so it's
Right.
it's all about waking up before she wakes up and getting 2 hours of something. And at some point she's standing next to me and I'm frightened because I usually have headphones on. But yeah, do you find that your muse team likes a certain time?
Yeah, I think it probably just likes isolation and quiet. And the way that I've come around to getting it is at night. But yeah, it also works in the morning, I find. So
Yeah. Cool. So I'm starting all these off by saying, talking about how we know each other, which is
right.
kind of funny because it's the first time we've actually spoken, though I feel
Yes.
like we've spoken.
I'm not actually sure how we've met. It might have been Twitter. I mean, it should probably be Twitter,
It was
I'm guessing.
definitely Twitter, yeah.
But which tweet I do not remember.
I
I
know.
remember seeing some of your dance videos. Did we have a mutual friend introduce us? I'm not
I don't
sure.
I don't know. I actually, so I remember some of it. I remember that you were tweeting about how you optimized your search engine, like I think I already said the word search engine optimization for the title of your ebook.
Right. Yeah.
And I started reading that thread and I was just immediately pulled in to what you were saying because you were talking about how if you can come up with a phrase
Right.
like friendly, ambitious nerd, that's
Yeah.
all common words, but not words that are necessarily put together, that you could be the number
Yes.
one ranked on Google.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this guy's talking about stuff that I like. This is
Yeah.
I'm super nerdy for that stuff.
Nice.
That was when I
Yeah,
followed you.
that makes sense. And then yeah, I try to keep an eye on followers who seem to be, creative, experimenting with stuff. So probably follow you back and then back and forth. Now with friends.
Yeah, I noticed that too, that that's a lot of what I see you do is that you're experimenting with different things and you talk about that out loud.
Yeah.
Like you talk about your process out loud. I noticed.
Yes.
When did you like how so you have a decent following on Twitter. When did you start?
It's been a very slow burn actually. I would say so we gotta kind of go way back. So I've always been very online. And even your question about talking about my process, I think when I was young, when I was a kid, I felt quite isolated from creative energy in general, or from like people making stuff, building stuff. Like I didn't see much of that and I didn't have much of that. I would try to find it wherever I could. So it was like in books and stuff, which felt a bit disconnected and abstract. And so I was determined to be like, if I wish I had someone kind of a little bit older, a little bit more experienced, kind of sharing stuff with me, like and not like finished products, but like whatever they're thinking and stuff. And so
Yeah.
I've always been determined to figure it out and then do that, like be the person that I wish I had. And I've always been very online. I think when I was a kid, I used to love libraries and books a lot because it's like creative work, music. And when I encountered the internet when I was like 10, I felt that it felt like that, or it had the promise of that it could be this kind of workshopy, artist studio-y kind of messy space. And I knew immediately that I wanted like a website of my own, like a homepage. And my first homepage when I was a kid was like, here are links to my favorite games and my favorite jokes, and welcome to my website, sign my guest book. It was it's kind of cute, but when I look back on it, I'm like, oh, it's like this primitive urge to be like a host of some space and invite people to
Right.
be. And yeah, I would post on anywhere basically. Like I used to post a lot on Quora. I used to post quite a bit on Reddit. I would basically go anywhere on the internet where they would have me, where I'm allowed to post, and I would just post as much as possible. And I think so. I had a Twitter account since about 2007, but like I would post, I don't know, once a week or something. Like I'm watching this movie, and it's like no replies, and
Right.
like it's almost just like a place to type out thoughts. But so I had the account. I would check in on it once in a while. I would tweet once in a while. But I think around 2013 or so, um, I found this blog, Ribbon Farm, and its founder Venkatesh Rao. And his Twitter, and he had like this medium-sized following, and they were all a bunch of nerds as well, like kind of geeks nerding out about like social like theories of how the office and the workplace works and stuff like that. But it was like nerdy in a kind of like naughty way. Like it wasn't just business fundamentals or whatever. They're like, oh, why are my colleagues like this? And I enjoyed those conversations, and I participated as much as I could, and like people followed me back. And then like from there, slowly I developed a bit more of an audience. So I would say 2013, so it probably started, like my Twitter following started growing from 2013 slowly. It did have like so around 2018 I had left my job. So I used to work in software marketing. When I left my job, I was like, okay, now I want to take at least a year to be creative as much as I can on all my platforms, all my
Right.
mediums. And Twitter was the one that kind of blew up. So in 2018, like I kind of went from, I think, about just under 2,000 followers to about like 5,000 to 7,000 followers, something like that.
Wow.
And yeah, so that's it.
Yeah, and the thing I notice is that you traffic in conversations. Like
Mm,
you're not pandering, you're not trying to just get followers, you're trying to find
mhm.
quality
Yes.
conversations. And I think that's what's intrigued me most about you and why I look forward to your tweets. And
Hmm.
it's not just it's definitely your brain. Like I'm just like, "Oh, yeah, I want to think about the same thing you're thinking about. Let's
Hmm.
do that." So I always open any thread that you post, I open and I read.
Oh,
And so I love the thread itself. And then I really love the conversations that start from it and the other people because they're not just saying, "Yes, this,"
yeah.
or arguing with you. They're adding something meaningful and looking to bring value.
Right. It's actually an interesting challenge to discourage or to not encourage people who are supportive in a very bland way.
Yeah.
So there's like it's I mean, I would just frame it as, yeah, so we're trying to incentivize, we're trying to create the space where people have thoughtful conversations. And I think I actually kind of, so it's a bit of a like first world problem or problem of success or whatever, but like I worry about growing your audience too quickly and becoming a bit of a celebrity or whatever you call it. And then it's like, then you get like swamped with these very, good intentioned people, but
Yeah.
who respond with very simplistic, like, yes, that's great, wonderful, amazing. And they're like, that's nice, guys, but like, do you have anything to like, can we argue about something,
Yeah. Yeah.
like,
Can we pick something apart? Can we grow together? Can we like
yeah.
uh
So that's, yeah.
well, and I think you've talked a lot about fame and the experience of fame and
Mhm.
like the small amount of it that I've experienced felt very lonely because people
Mm.
are just like, "Oh my gosh, you're Michelle from Grace and Michelle." And then
Right.
like that's it. We're not like that's about the extent of our connection. And what I've loved over the years are the people who are they're fans, but then they sort of transition. And I could just tell by the way they speak to me that they don't relate
Mm.
to me as up on a pedestal. They relate to
Right.
me as an equal.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
I've formed a lot of in-person real life friendships from that, just from people who they shot their shot, they sent a message and I responded
Excellent.
positively. And then like they came to live with me in New York or I've had a lot.
Wow.
I have a lot of stuff like that of bringing
Nice.
into the real world. And I know you do too, because I've seen
Yeah.
photo and video. Can you tell me about the gatherings that have happened?
Right. So the first kind of major thing that happened, and I was really blessed that this happened. But yeah, I had a friend. I have a bunch of friends who are in the Bay Area in San Francisco, California, and I can't remember what was the context exactly, but things kind of aligned just nice that somebody was trying to organize a kind of like a dinner party series where they invite friends from like elsewhere in the world. And so me and my friend Anna, so Anna's originally from Budapest, and then she was based in London and I was in Singapore, and they were kind of just looking to have like a diverse crowd at some event.
Right.
And we were kind of in the right place at the right time, and they felt they liked us enough, and they were like, hey, do you guys want to come to San Francisco for like a couple of weeks or whatever. And so since I was gonna go there, I was determined to like make the most of it and try and meet as many people as I could. And so I turned it into like this whole, I was like live tweeting it, I guess. And now in retrospect, I wish I had made videos, but I think at the time I was still self-conscious about videos.
Mm.
But yeah, I was like every day I would tweet. So I would try to have a schedule of like in advance, I would pick some people that I wanted to meet and I would reach out to them. And a couple of them actually hung out with me. And then I also kind of had open time where I would be like, hey, I'm not doing anything today. Who wants to hang out at this place? And then like a whole bunch of people would turn up. And it just felt really it changed my life. It was like prior to that experience, I kind of intellectually knew like, oh, musicians, artists, creative people, or just, there is this loving, supportive energy somewhere in the world, right? But like that was my very concrete experience of kind of almost being handed off from stranger to stranger who became friends, right? Like people were
Yeah.
just taking care of me, passing me along, giving me help. And it just, I feel like the 2 weeks that I spent kind of allowing strangers or acquaintances to take care of me in a sense, like that really, it relieved a bunch of my anxiety about people in general. And it made me determined to do more of it. I would hear these stories. So like one of these, I think on one weekend we did like an open call for a meetup at like a park, Dolores Park. And I distinctly remember there were two guys who both recognized each other from work. I think they both worked at Apple even. And they were like, like kind of like corridor mates. Like they see each other at work every day,
Yeah.
but they've never had a conversation directly. And then they both, because they both turned up at this thing, which is to meet Visa and a bunch of his Twitter friends, me. They both instantly kind of discovered that they had a deeper connection in some sense, and now they're friends. And like they were hanging. The thing is, they were in proximity the whole time, but they just never had that chance to connect. And then I'm like, oh wow, this must be like this. We could do this in every major city in the world, like right? I can, and that was my plan before COVID. I was gonna go to New York. I was gonna go to like Mumbai, and like anywhere you can organize these meetups. And like I remember, so there's this video of there was this one weekend that I was speaking at, I think it was like a co-living house. Like they have this backyard, and we invited a bunch of people. And so like people were joking that it's the Visa event because it's me. And I grapple with this. I'm like, is this kind of narcissistic? Like people coming to see me, like what's so great about me? But like the super cool thing was I was the first one there, and like we didn't really make any plans for what was going to happen. But so people would show up one by one, and so it's in the backyard, and I would witness like the first person you chat with and the second person you introduce to the first person, and then like slowly there's more and more people showing up, and then it kind of naturally, I love watching this kind of thing. It kind of forms up into little groups of people, and they're all having different conversations, and they're all getting to know each other. And I enjoyed that I could walk up to any group of people, and because I'm the reason that they're there, I could just like, hey, what are you guys talking about? And they will instantly include me in the conversation. It's not like, who are you? Right. And that was super satisfying. But I was, at some point, I was like sitting down and just watching the whole thing happen. And I'm like, this isn't about me though. Like it's all these people meeting up and getting to know each other. Yeah. And like once I witnessed that, I'm like, oh, this is like powerful. Like this is a thing that this is a gift I can give people. I can show up in a lot of major cities, organize a meetup, and a whole bunch of people will become friends. Some people will start dating, like some people might start companies together. Like and if you juxtapose this against the fact that, we live in a world where people report becoming more lonely, and yet like we have the technology and we have to connect with people. So it's really, it's this, I obsess about this all the time. I'm like, there's so much potential that we can kind of unlock and connect if we just kind of take the initiative.
Yeah, and to take risks, because I very much relate to the is this narcissistic thing. Though I follow a number of different therapists on Instagram who ensure me that if you're worried about being narcissistic, then you are not a narcissist. I'm like, okay.
Right? No narcissist stays up at night. Am I a narcissist? They might either be like, yeah, of course I'm a narcissist. I love me. Who wouldn't love me? Or they're like, no, I'm not a narcissist. But fuck off.
I don't even know what that word is.
Right. But if you sit down and you're like, am I though? Am I not? Like that, then as long, I guess
probably not.
We should always want to make sure that we have a little bit of that. Like if you completely eliminate it and you're like certain, like, yes, I am, or no, I'm not, then it's like, okay, that's a worrying sign.
No, you have to have a little, I feel like some of the qualities of a narcissist, like not the manipulative, horrible gaslighty side, but the like the pieces where you're willing to, stand up and say, this is my event, come meet me, to whatever extent that, whatever percentage that is, quote, narcissistic. You have to be able to do that to be in the public eye. And what I really heard in your story about the gathering is that you basically have planted a flag in the sand. You've said, I am this person. Come, everyone. Do you relate? Let's talk. Let's be friends. And I'm like, yes, I relate. In fact, when you were planning your trip to New York and you were like, my wife and I are coming, we need a place to stay. Where should we stay? This is when I really started interacting with you, because I happened to be on Twitter the moment you posted that. And when you see a tweet and it's like 10 seconds ago and you're like, oh, I'll be the first. Like, I know what it takes to rise above the noise. And I
Right.
know you have a lot of followers. And I think I was just following you and wanting to interact with you more, but you have a lot of followers. So there's just like a lot of interaction happening. So when I saw that, I jumped on it because I live in New Jersey and I
Right.
lived in New York City for 9 years. And I know lots about where you should stay and where you shouldn't stay. And so
Awesome.
I sent you, I was like, hey, you should check out like Ridgewood, New Jersey. You should check out,
Right.
like, I just named a bunch of towns and I said, New
Yeah.
Jersey Transit can take you right in. And in the back of my head, I was like, whenever this guy comes here, I'm going to meet up with him. Like, I don't have to ask right now. That's going to
Yeah.
happen because I've already done so many of these like meeting people from the internet things.
Right.
So to me, it was a foregone conclusion. And of course, COVID, so then you didn't come. But that was my first, like, yeah, I have some value to provide. This is my area of expertise. Here we
Nice.
go. And I saw that the people in Brooklyn, I'm so sad that I'm not there because I would have hung out with those people in Brooklyn that got together
Right.
like in your
Yeah.
absence.
Yeah.
They had a Friends of Visa gathering in Brooklyn.
That that felt like witnessing that. I feel like honestly, I feel like I died, and that's like my like funeral sort of like you get to see like that's what a funeral is, right? It's like people gathering in your name to cherish your memory in a sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say yeah, it's one of those things where how you talk about it might shape how people see it, but it's just it's I feel like I've won like the thing that I struggled with as a teenager and in my early 20s, kind of like am I of value in the world, right? Am I doing anything that makes any difference? Like when I see people gathered and having a good time, I'm like, yes, that's worth kind of making stuff for, like for other people.
Yeah. You talked too about maybe we should lay some groundwork that you're writing this book. Can you just talk about your ebook?
Right. So I have written a lot of stuff. Like writing is kind of my dominant way of making sense of things. It's my way of thinking out loud. It's my way of making friends with people. It's just I read a lot of books as a kid. I love words. I can write indefinitely. Right. So I have a lot of blog posts. I have a lot of everything, a lot of tweets. And at some point I'm like, I do want to take this to the next level in some way professionally. And I'm also the kind to really agonize about strategy. And I'm like, oh, so what should my first book be? And I have a bunch of options. I'm like, I could write a memoir, but who cares about a memoir of some guy who nobody knows yet? So I have that as a draft, but I'm not going to touch that. I have a novel about like teenage musicians in Singapore. But again, I'm like, the audience for that is so small, and asking someone to read a novel, like I wouldn't even ask my friends to read a novel because it's such a big thing to ask. Like it's a commitment. Like I feel like I have to come up with something that is easier to read and more directly useful to people. And then if they like that, they might be likelier to want to read my novel, right? So okay, not the novel. Then I was thinking, okay, what else? What value can I give though? Like, should I write? I could write about like ADHD or something specific to like chaotic productivity for nerds or something, but like
Ooh,
I
I'm super into that.
yeah, I'm that's gonna be like one of my next things. So I have a draft for that, but I was like, I don't want to be defined as that guy though. I don't want people to be like calling me, hi, meet Visa, he is the kind of ADHD productivity guy. Like I do love, I have ADHD. I care about it a lot, but I don't want to introduce myself as, hi, I'm the ADHD guy. I'm like, I don't want that to be my main thing. And so I kind of circled around everything. I'm like, what is it? What is it I want to be defined by? What is it I want to use as like my calling card to introduce to people? And then I kind of asked people, what do y'all think about me? Like, how do you introduce me to other people? And people said things like, oh, Visa is great on Twitter. He's very friendly. He's very, he's like he's has all these nerdy threads. And so I kind of just did like a semi brainstormy piece together things kind of thing. And yeah, I eventually came up with Friendly Ambitious Nerd as I can't remember. I do have a blog post about this somewhere, but I can't remember the specifics in my head off the top of my head. But it was basically like the traits that I feel are good and we need more of in the world, and represent me and represent the kind of people that I would want to meet. So that it kind of like converged, and it's not like I had like a flash of insight one day. It's just I laid out all my stuff, and I'm like trying to connect the dots. And I'm like, what is all this about? Like, how does it all come together? And so yeah, so Friendly Ambitious Nerd is an ebook, and it is it's like a versioned ebook, meaning so the currently version 1 is available, and there's going to be 1.1 hopefully like in a couple of months. And it's a bunch of short so some of it is actually just Twitter threads that I have that people have liked, and then I kind of updated it and edited it a little bit. Some of it is like blog posts, some of it is essays, and it's kind of, you know, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier about wanting to share my process. It's kind of what I wish I had read when I was 20.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you can choose to be this, you can choose to, and you can, and I kind of separate the book into 3 sections for each thing. So it's like how to be a better friend, how to use friendly energy to help people and to help yourself, and improve your relationship with yourself. And ambition is kind of like about thinking about scale and thinking about it's not just about prestige and accolades. In fact, it's like, so I define ambition as it's not about accolades, it's rather it's about living true to your values at the highest possible scale.
Mhm.
And then being a nerd for me, it's just like it's about being having the courage to be interested, and to let your curiosity drive, and like, you know, like be a taste driven kind of thing. So yeah, if you kind of assemble all of that together, it's like that's, I feel that, and then you can use that as like a lens to look through history of like who are the interesting artists and intellectuals and whatever. And I find that everybody that I really admire, they all kind of have all of these traits. Like they're social, they're not kind of in isolation. And I mean, I have respect for, you know, like ambitious nerds who work in isolation and they can't stand other people. Like I respect them. But like I really admire those who invite other people to join and kind of create a scene. And then it's like, it's a space that people can join. And yeah, so that is, I've sold like, I'm almost reaching 1,000 copies sold, which I'm pretty proud about, because I don't actually love the book yet enough to do like in like serious marketing for it. I feel like there's
I
still a
love
bunch of
that
hope.
you say that. Like I
Yeah.
you say I notice you say a lot of things. Like this is why I follow you, because you say a lot of things that I think but haven't articulated before,
Mhm.
or stuff I feel and have never put
Nice.
words to, and or never said out loud to other people. But there is something about when you make something, you gotta love it. Like you
Yeah.
gotta really be behind it.
Mhm.
Um, like people are asking me, how come it's been so long and you've never done this podcast before? It seems like something that would be so obvious. And it's like, I just didn't have the weirdly, I didn't have the title, like the name of it.
Right, right. Yeah, I get it.
Once I thought of it, I was like, oh wait, break up with your bullshit.
Mm.
That could be a book. Oh wait, that could be a podcast. And
Mhm.
and then I'm filming 2 days later. I mean, like the second that
Yeah.
I get something and it's the
Yeah.
idea, I
Mm.
don't I don't hesitate. I'm like, that's
Right.
it. But it took me many years to
Yeah.
be in this place,
Yeah.
because you let it all percolate and cook. I love how you
Yeah.
say like you're trying to connect the dots, because I think a lot of people who are listening probably have trouble coming up with the thing and think
Mm.
it is supposed to be this moment of
Right.
clarity. And even the title of this podcast was the result of the woman I work with on my marketing saying, hey, we need a good line at the top of the page where we're going to get people's email addresses for this event that we're going to do. And we were just
Mm.
calling it the event for the longest
Right.
time. I'm like,
Right.
and she told me to write 10 possible titles or possible lines at the top of the page. Like, it's time to do that thing that you said you would, or
Right.
something like that. And I sent her 10, and then she goes, okay, the vibe needs to be more like this. Send me 10 more. And
Right.
she just kept making me
Nice.
write them until finally I texted her, it's time to break up with your bullshit and get that project started. She goes, that's the one, go.
Yeah.
And that's how this, so it didn't just erupt, but once we
Right.
got it, then it was like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
that's gonna work.
Yeah. I do find that very often these things never quite come directly. Like when you
Yeah.
try to come up with it's always like a little bit out of, it's like in your peripheral vision in a way.
Yeah.
And one of my threads about this, I say like very often the best phrases you come up with, it's like you're trying to explain this, and then like you're so focused on trying to explain this that you accidentally say something insightful and like clever in like, you know, like just to get to that. And
Yeah.
then someone's like, "Hey, like that's a really good phrase." You come up with, I'm like, "Oh yeah, cool." And then you have to
Right.
identify that that's what you did. Yeah, about the loving what you do thing. So I talk a lot about taste, and you know, I actually, so I didn't set up a Goodreads thing, but somebody else did, I think. And there are like Goodreads reviews of my book,
Oh,
and it's
are
like, you know,
there?
there's a
Oh, I
bunch.
want to look at that.
Yeah, and so there's like a few 5-star reviews and a few 4-star reviews, and I gave myself a 4-star review for version 1.1 because for 1.0 because that is my honest
Yeah.
assessment, and I believe that to make great work we have to be honest about what's good and what's not, and like I believe that I do have what it takes to eventually make the book a 5, but it's
Yeah.
not quite there yet. It's like there's a bunch of things. It's like the synthesis between the elements is not quite there.
Yeah.
Like the first section is really good and the second two sections are a little bit weaker, and there's some like recurring things that I'm not, there's like not enough, the callbacks are not quite right. Like I can envision what it will be like when it's great, probably like version 1.2 or 1.3, it'll be really good, and then I can honestly say when I point to it and I do marketing for it, like I would describe it the same way I would describe another book by somebody else that I think is absolutely freaking amazing.
Yeah.
And like when I can reach that state and then I can be completely honest in when I'm describing it, then I think like people will know. You can tell when someone's like,
Yeah.
when something really really moves someone and they're honest about it, it's very powerful.
100%. Yeah. I love your honesty about it because I feel that way too. And I think there's a lot of conversations we can get into with people who don't understand the nuance as a creator of being able to give yourself a 4-star review or less. And they just hear it as, oh, you're being self-deprecating. It's like, no, no,
Right.
no. I'm being accurate.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I try my best to, and so I tell people this is a skill that you can develop with yourself and with your friends, and like, you don't necessarily have to be harsh. I think some people feel that the only way to like some people think that I have to, there's like only tough love, right? Like
Yeah.
either I'm bullshitting you or it's tough love. And I'm like, you can just be selective about it. You can just be like, whenever you spot a friend doing something unusually good, make sure you point it out and be like, hey, that was like, like I've been following your Instagram fashion post or whatever, and like this outfit is uncommonly good. Like, wow, the nails and the earrings freaking match. Like when you point out these things, you cultivate your own taste and you help people feel what kind of sparks more electric
Yeah.
energy. And yeah, you do more and more of that, and it starts to become, you get a sensitivity for it. You notice when like you're scrolling through your timeline, like, oh shit, this tweet is actually really good. And then when you do more and more of that, I find that then other people who are also kind of extra sensitive start to get drawn to you, and then everything just gets better.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a hard time promoting something that I don't feel that way about,
Mm-hmm.
So when I was big on YouTube in 2011, and I would have people reach out to me with their stuff and ask me to look at it. I mean, in the beginning, I looked at everything, and then eventually I just got to this point where I was like, I can't look at
Mm,
stuff. But every once in a while, I came across someone. Actually, there's a girl that I've reached out to be on the podcast. Her name is Cherry Wallace, and she
mhm.
sent me her stuff when she was just starting. She had like
Right.
200 views or something, and I was like, okay, the the meeting of how adorable you are with
Mm,
how smart you are and your video production quality is like, this is good, keep going. She's got like
right.
600,000 followers on YouTube now, and I think that's that, and maybe she has more, I don't even know, but she's huge now. And it's like, in those beginning stages, if someone tells you that what you're doing is good,
Mm,
and someone that you respect, listen. Because I
right.
think some people
Yeah.
think, oh,
Yeah.
you're just being nice. I'm like, I don't be nice.
Yeah.
If I don't like your stuff, I just don't say anything.
Same. Yeah, exactly. It's really one of my other things, it's like, so when I was a teenager, I used to think like, when I heard things like, there are phrases like, oh, you got to be a man of your word, or oh, your word is your bond. I'm like, yeah, I guess, I can be playful about it and fool around. But then I think at some point, I can't remember when, it might have been after depression and stuff, and I'm just trying to, I think part of what messed me up at some point was that I used to think you can be clever about words, and like, you can just, it's all about framing, and you can just kind of you can take something bad and you can put it in a good light and now it's good, which, yeah, there's some cases where that's possible. But like, when you become very very rigorous about saying only true things as far as possible, like, you can then trust yourself and other people can trust you to a degree that really it increases your power. Like, I'm repeating myself, but it's something that I think a lot of people will nod their heads to, but like, and then they don't think about it very much after that. But it's like, if you're just kind of 5 to 10% more rigorous about being kind of ruthless, and I mean, ruthless, it sounds negative, but like just kind of intense about only saying the truth
Yeah.
and it like what it makes everything kind of resonate more, and the value of that is very hard to imagine when you haven't experienced it yet, but it kind of it gets to a point where it feels like magic, like relative to the life before.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really it's crazy, it's super yeah, you get it.
I do. I think for me that starts with someone says, "How are you?" and I tell them the truth.
Mm,
Even my clients, my coaching
right.
clients, we
Yeah.
get on the phone and I'll then worry, I overshared or I shouldn't have said that or now they're going to worry about me. But I trust myself enough to know that if I was not okay to be on the call, I would have canceled the call because I've canceled many
Right.
calls. Like, hey, I'm having, and I just tell my clients, I'm like, sorry, I started having a panic attack, and I
Mm,
can't. Like, I end up taking the whole day off, which doesn't really
yeah.
happen anymore because I've figured out enough ways to circumvent anxiety that it doesn't
Mm,
typically get me in the middle of the day, but sometimes it
right.
gets me, and
Yeah.
then I just have to tap out.
Right.
And yeah, it's I think there's something about being okay with where you are and being okay with people knowing where you are that actually I think that's part of what's allowed the anxiety to shift in me is that I
Yeah,
stop
I was gonna
trying
say
to
that.
make it stop, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I was gonna say that. That's really there's this. I'm being reminded of this quote from Kenny Werner, who's a jazz pianist, and he was giving a clinic. It's on YouTube, and he was saying that half the reason people show up to witness like a singer, or like to see artists perform, half of it is they want to enjoy the music and enjoy, like, oh, I like how it sounds, I like how it feels, like that stuff. And he said the other half of it is you want to witness someone and I guess this is also true for sports, it's true for like ballet, it's true for all of those things. You want to witness someone who is radically accepting what is happening, and
Mm,
they are comfortable with themselves, and they like he's using this to describe kind of, there are the musicians who are on the path, and then there are the musicians who have kind of crossed a certain threshold. And the path is when you're still afraid of making mistakes, and you're still kind of, you're judging yourself in the moment that you make a mistake, which I still do. I think most of us
yeah,
still do this. But like when an artist kind of is in that zone where they've rehearsed their craft so thoroughly that they don't even really believe in mistakes anymore, in that sense.
yeah,
Like if something bad happens, it's part of the show kind of, and they
right.
accept it, and they deal with it in some way. There's this, and you can find all these things. There's like this thing where Stevie Ray Vaughan, the he like breaks a string on stage, and he just kind of keeps playing a little bit, and his tech comes along and they swap it out, and you're watching it like, wow, that's just so, like, the relationship that that person has with their art and their instrument and their crew is just this perfect harmony. Even as things are going wrong, you're watching it and you're like, that's beautiful.
Much
Even as
better.
things are going wrong, and you're like, wow, that
Yeah.
is, and there's like a lesson there for just dealing with chaos and a lack of control, and being okay and doing things, but not necessarily giving up or giving in. It's just
Yeah, I think that the energy of trying to hold everything together and allow and like try and make it this perfect vision of what you had in your head actually limits
mm,
the possibility of how great it could all be, especially on stage, because anything could happen when you're on stage. You have nothing, you have no control. Someone could yell
yeah,
something from the audience, and the best stand-up comedians deal with the heckler in a way that it makes the show better.
yeah,
Great, this happened. How can I use it?
yeah,
Is I feel like, oh, this thing happened. How can I use it as the first thing
right,
that you think of? That's a muscle I'm trying to strengthen, especially with
yeah,
doing more stuff online. It's like, oh, Instagram changed hashtags because of the election. And now my entire break up with your bullshit challenge that was all around go to this hashtag and find the other people is ruined.
oh,
Ruined.
yikes,
Right.
yeah,
And then I talked to Cassidy and she was like, no, we're going to use it. So make a video about how pissed off you are that this just happened. People
yeah,
like it when people are pissed off. So go ahead and do that.
right,
And she's
yeah.
right, you know? And then
I love, yeah, I love that you say we're going to use it. That reminds me of, like, so one of my kind of slightly more, I don't know if you would say it's unorthodox, or if it's so my relationship with like piracy and kind of people posting stuff without credit, and people, so I don't like it, and I'm not advocating for it, but it always kind of breaks my heart a little bit to see like artists, and I don't blame them. I empathize with their frustration and stuff like that. But I'm always like, if someone steals my stuff and repost like let's say content, they repost my content somewhere else, like I see that not as them stealing something from me, but it's almost like them giving me an invitation to participate in this new drama that they've created. Like, you know, so if someone steals my content and like let's say they copy a tweet and they post it somewhere else, like I'm gonna use that. I'm not gonna be like, how dare you steal my tweet? I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, we're gonna have some fun now, right? Like, ooh, like I would try to find a way to, like, it's the show must go on, right? Like, and
Yeah.
I'm not gonna break character in a sense to become like this grumpy, frustrated, angry,
Right.
which would be in my right. It's my right to be
Yeah.
upset about someone stealing my stuff. But like, you know, if I want to charm and win over even more people, like you've like, especially if like they have a new different audience, I want them to see like, oh, here's a guy who has been kind of has had something stolen from him, but he is so funny about it and he
Yeah,
is
he's being
so
cool.
entertaining about it. Yeah, and then people, and then that's how you really win hearts, in
Oh,
my
I
opinion.
agree. I agree. I really like, as someone, I'm sure you've had stuff stolen, I've had stuff stolen.
Yeah.
And in that moment, there is a reaction that you have. And I think the extent to which you can not take action from reaction, but
Mhm.
actually look at who do I want to be about this? How do I
Yes.
want to show up around something like this? And it's tough because I think that having something stolen from you for most people elicits a trauma response.
Right.
It
Right.
elicits like maybe there's some time in your life when your boundaries were very stepped on, and
Right.
it's like that person in that moment is that whoever it was in your past that did that to you the first few times,
Yeah.
and you're back in a young version of you, you're in your reactivity. And a lot of people live here most of the
Yeah.
time until they do some healing work, but I know for me, when I've had stuff stolen, I'm activated, like my heart is
Mm.
pounding and my
Yeah.
ears are
Yeah.
red and I can't
Same.
think straight, and I just want to go and,
Mm.
tell them how it
Yeah.
is. And it's like,
Yeah.
through coaching and therapy, I've recognized more and more that, but what's the outcome that I desire from
Yes.
this?
Yes. Yeah.
Is this thing is this tweet I'm about to send, is that going to elicit the thing
Mhm.
that I actually want or not? And it's
Right.
usually not.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so for anyone listening who's had something stolen,
Yes.
or anything reactive, I think there's a lot of
Mhm.
reactivity on the internet. And this is why I
Yeah.
like your people so much, because it's a lot more responding than reacting.
Mm. Right. Right. I also like to when I'm in my good place and I'm thinking about these things from a healthy point of view. It's also like, yeah, it's like what you're saying about who do I want to be when I show up for this. And I want to emphasize really that it's very often how we act in these kind of peak moments that end up disproportionately defining us in at least in the eyes of other people or in like the public sphere or whatever. Like one of my riffs is that, you know, so let's say you have a relationship, right? And 95% of the relationship is happy and going well and stuff. But like when you fight, how you fight defines and determines everything else, right? Like if you're super nice on day-to-day stuff, but when you fight dirty, that like diminishes the whole value of everything else.
Yes.
Whereas like if you can be really calm and try your best to be calm and fair and respectful in the fight, that really elevates everything else in a sense, right? And so yeah, it's kind of crisis oriented thinking, but like crises are inevitable in some way. Like eventually some bad shit is going to happen, right? Eventually you get the phone call eventually. And so it really helps, I think, to, I mean, as far as it's manageable. So I can imagine, like, so I'm saying we should rehearse for crises, but I can imagine that for some people, they should definitely not rehearse for crises because they're already so anxious all the time. So
Yeah.
it's like strength training, I guess. Like, make sure you're well rested and you have the headspace for it, the time for it. And then when you can do it, it's worth kind of rehearsing. Like, what will I do when someone smears me online? Like, if you're going to be a creative, public facing person, eventually it's going to happen. It helps to be kind of prepared so that it doesn't completely catch you blind.
This is so I've mentioned to you a few times, sometimes you put up a thread and it makes me think back to
Mhm.
experiences I've had as a program leader with accomplishment coaching, which is a life coach and leadership training program that I lead. And it's a year-long process. And I kind of relate to it like a petri dish for life, because we're putting 24 people in a room together and we're
Nice.
saying, okay,
you're all paying $18,000. You're all committed. Yeah, it's for the year, which includes your coach. So you get a personal coach that you're talking to every week and a lot of other stuff. But like the people that show up for this are exceptional human beings that would say yes to that.
Right.
And they're all human. So there's going to be multiple people around that table that trigger the pants off you, or that you're like, I don't really want to know that person. And then we have them take on a bunch of shared goals and individual goals. And it ends up driving up things that are it's not happening in real life. It's happening here. We've sort of created a microcosm for life in this room, so that when you have your strong reaction, I can, as the program leader, say, okay, so what's coming up? And actually be with you in it and look through it, because it's sort of like training for when it happens in real life,
Right.
which is a lot of what working with a coach is like. Like when my clients get mad at me or whatever happens between us, I can actually be someone who I don't have a history with them. I'm not personally offended by them. It's my job not to be. It's my job to be like separated, so I can talk to them about what's happening rather than being like, well, why'd you say that to me? And like every other person in their life, So it's sort of, I call it like strength training for when that happens out in the world. And routinely I notice that there's stuff I can talk to my coach about and there's interactions I can have. And then I can't have that with my husband. And it's like, well, what's different here? What am I trusting? What am I allowing with her that I'm simply choosing not to bring to my husband? And like, you can actually not control, but you can affect so much in your life by how you show up to it and what you choose.
Right.
And I think people think you're at the mercy of how other people show up.
Yeah. It's funny what you mentioned. I sometimes joke with my wife that all of the work that I do kind of practicing, just being this gracious, supportive, therapeutic person with friends, with clients, online in general, like all of that is kind of practice and rehearsal for like our relationship in a sense. Like it's because it's hard. So we go way back. We're like childhood sweethearts from like we met when we were 10.
I by the way, I just love how you talk about your wife. You're always just like, she's so hot, she's so awesome, this is so great. And I just adore that about you. Sorry, continue.
Yeah. And it's just and she's one of the things I love about her is she's very strong-willed. She has like she's like an investigative journalist in spirit. Like she just has that, like she needs to know things and she'll question and she'll doubt and she'll interrogate. And so we balance each other very well, because I'm like this super good faith, assume the best of everybody kind of like, like I would, if not for her, I would probably get like taken advantage of in some context. Yeah. I mean, and the cool thing is once you have someone like that who has your back, you can be more of that because you don't have to be both at the same time. Like we can do good cop, bad cop, because she's very good at what she does. I'm very good at what I do. And yeah, it's so where was I going with this? Yeah, it's just interesting. And I think this is quote from Ram Dass, which is something like, if you think you're enlightened, like go home and spend a week with your family. Right?
Yes.
If you think you've reached enlightenment sitting in a monastery and feeling zen, like okay, that's like level 1. Level 2, go home to mom.
It is like an Olympic sport to be able to like maintain your being around your family, because they helped you invent the parts of you that come out when you're scared.
Right. There's a quote there's like a Bible verse about how when Jesus went back to his hometown, like there were people who are like, this guy's a Messiah? No, he's not. He's like the carpenter's son. Like I saw him growing up. Like what miracles could he do? What like wisdom could he possibly have? It's like my neighbor down the street. And then I think he said something like, only in his hometown is a prophet without honor and without something. And it's, I find, so it's super humbling. Like, even if you're not religious or whatever, like the leader of the number one, like world famous number one religion, like he went back home and people are like, nah. and there's something humbling about that. Like if Jesus dealt with that, we're not gonna do much better. Right?
Yeah, for real. I mean, that's such a great example. I've never heard that before either.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell everybody that. Well, I guess, everybody who's listening just got to hear it, but that's a good one for my coaches in training, because, people start to do some deep work and then they're like, but then I talked to my mom and
like, that's the final boss.
that is the final boss.
the most difficult challenge you will face, right? Is and yourself, right? The closer you get in, right, the harder. Like it's so I find it so much easier to be kind and nourishing to other people than to myself. Like that's
Oh yeah.
really the further you go in, like the more, because you have the history, you have, like, it's so easy for me to impress new people. Like each new person that I
Oh, me
meet,
too.
I'm meeting them. They know none of my bullshit.
Yeah.
And my wife knows all of my bullshit.
Yes.
Right? These new people don't know my bullshit, and they've seen me at my best. Whereas, like, the further you go back, childhood friends, family, like myself, like the further back you go, there's more of this. Oh, but you made so many mistakes, though. Oh, but you is it that kind of thing?
Yeah, and they relate to you as a past version of you.
That
And
too, yeah.
so that can be tough. And it's like at the same time, you're responsible. I think we're responsible for training and retraining the people in our life how to relate to us. And when
Right.
I say training, I mean simply like talking about it. Like, hey, I noticed that um you keep mentioning um this thing about how I used to be in relationships, that I used to be very promiscuous and whatever, but I've
Right.
actually done a lot of work around that, and
Yeah.
I'm not there anymore, and I would really appreciate it if like, it's not a big deal, it's okay, but like I
Yeah.
really appreciate it if you could with me clean the slate and relate
Mhm.
to me different, because that's not how I see myself anymore.
Right.
And that's a deepening of relationship type of
Right.
conversation. And
Oh, I have a hilarious anecdote.
go, go.
Uh, I mean, so I was gonna, I think, so I used to buy the same coffee from my place downstairs. Like there's a coffee shop near my house, and I would buy the same coffee every single day with the same, like, slightly less sugar or whatever. And there was one day that I wanted something different, and like the lady just started making my same coffee as usual, and I was like, I think the thought that went into my head was, how the comfort of familiarity has turned its table on me. Like when I
Wow.
want to try something. And then I went home, and, like, it's like, sometimes early morning, and when I'm having my coffee, I have these thoughts. It's just like very, like, weirdly profound for, like, I haven't woken up yet. Maybe it's because, like, yeah, I haven't woken up yet, so like
Yeah.
my brain is still. And I was talking to my wife about it, and we were like, I wonder if really, if a large percent of people who have affairs, or they end their relationships or whatever, it's really just that there's all this baggage and there's all this history, and they don't know how to process it and transmute it. And so it's like they're so tired of that, and they want to be with someone new. I mean, it's not even that you want to be with someone new. You want to be a different person yourself. You're
Yeah.
tired of
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yourself,
Yeah.
and you want to
Mhm.
be you want to be witnessed differently. You want to be perceived differently. And then you juxtapose that with, like, people say that there's such a common trope that, like, oh, after like 7 years in marriage, it's like it's boring now, and you're like,
But there's a
you
statistic
feel.
that that's when people cheat in 7 years.
Yeah. And I mean, sure, fair enough, but I also feel like it's like the coffee thing. It's like, I like to say, you can have an affair with your spouse. Like you can
Mm.
kind of go somewhere, and it helps to do it, like, with multiple things happening. So if you travel together somewhere new, it's easier to experience each other in a different light, and then see, like, I remember when I went scuba diving with my wife, and like both of us can barely swim, and we're terrible at everything. And I saw her scared, kind of like anxious, nervous, and I was so drawn to her in that moment. Like,
Mm.
I'm so used to thinking of her as like, oh, she's my wife, she has stuff figured out, she's kind of a little bit bossy, she has like higher standards than me, so she's always telling me, like, I just had I've developed this sense of, like, our relationship. But it's really in this narrow context and constraints, right? And then when you witness the person in a different context, you're like, oh shit, this person is so complex and different and surprising, right? And then
100%.
yeah, just so again, once you realize this, it kind of drives, like, it drives me a little bit crazy all the time to be like, everything that you think is kind of everything that you think is a problem with regards to something could be the way you're perceiving it, could be the way,
Yeah.
just the way you are with it. It's not the thing itself,
Yeah.
it's
It's not the person. This is the thing. Like, I don't, you and I were chatting on Twitter about this, that like there's probably multiple people and that I know I could be happy with other than
right.
my husband. I think the same is true for him. And I hope it is, because if I die, I hope he goes and finds somebody else,
Yes.
and I just choose to build with him. And I remember, so I wasn't very spiritually connected at all. And then my mom passed away.
Right.
And I joined that coach training program. I joined the coach training program 3 months after she died. I joined it. I officially signed up for it. She was still alive. I told her I was going to do it. So I got to tell her what I was doing next in my life and whatever. But, in the course of, oh wait, no, I totally lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
Your mom, the coach thing, marriage.
Yeah, it's something about the marriage. Oh yeah. Okay, so we we went through a lot, he and I, because we were she was sick for almost 2 years. And so we were going back and forth from Brooklyn to Jersey to see her all the time. And it was rough, really, really rough. And then right after she died, it was sort of like a release. And there was this sudden ability for us to maybe think about something else. Cause I joke when she got sick, on a Mac, it says click the lock to prevent for any further changes. I feel like I did that on my life. Nothing will change. I will stay. I didn't even think about my relationship, whatever. I wasn't evaluating it in any way. But then after that, it was well, do I really want to be in this relationship? And we've gone through many rounds of that in the time that we've been. He broke up with me right after we started the coach training program. Suddenly he was like, I just realized, because he started this, we did it together. We did that year-long program. We both did it. And he had revelations after the first weekend, which happens to most people. And he was like, I can't be with you because of all these reasons. And I fought for it. And that was the first time in my life that I've fought for something in a relationship. I usually just, out the door.
All right, see ya, bye.
Yeah. Just on to the next person. But I actually wanted it. And then, we've had many rounds of this reevaluation. I think that that's an important part to understand about relationships, is that marriage is a starting point, not a finish line. And you're in a constant state of reinvention. And I mentioned the spiritual thing because after I did the program, there was some content in the program about spirituality. And I was like, I was raised Catholic and I've given up religion, whatever, but not religion, spirituality. So they're different, right? They're different. And I started to have dialogue with my mom through writing. I write a question and then she answers me. And I remember I was really considering not being married anymore. And I took the day off and I went to the park and I brought tissues with me and I just wrote and cried. And one of the things my mom said to me, she was like, look, you could break up with Justin, but it's not about Justin. And she's like, let's be really clear who this guy is, and just started listing stuff about him. And is like, you could find someone else, but that's pretty much who you want. That list, this list right here, this is exactly who you've said you want. He's great for you. There's a lot of stuff you need to change though. Otherwise, next person who comes along, it's going to be the same conversation and maybe even worse, maybe even a less great guy. And ever since then, I've been like, okay, that's it. This is my person. We might really get into it and we might even put divorce on the table, and we have, and talk it through. But we always come back to no, we want to be together. So let's keep fighting. And it does feel like a fight for the relationship to work a lot of the time.
That reminds me of when I was, so my ex-boss is the person who is probably the most responsible for my kind of functional growth, I would say. So he was like a coach / therapist for me, and we would have one-on-one meetings, and he kind of challenged me to be much more functional. I used to hang out with really dysfunctional musicians, and they kind of there's that very grungy kind of crowd, just fuck around. And he was this very high functioning, very competent, kind of cool guy. And we would have conversations every 2 weeks or so about a little bit about performance, but then it would very quickly end up becoming kind of what are my limiting beliefs, what's stopping me from doing better, and what's blah blah blah. And I think one of the things he'd said that I wasn't sure I agreed with at the time, but has become truer and truer in the time since we passed, is he just kind of, and he has this very casual, chill way of pointing things out, such that you can't even argue with him, because he's just, as in, I don't even feel, he's just so zen about it. And he's like, he said something like, you seem to be frustrated with, you describe your frustrations as with the work, right? And if you don't want to do this job, you don't have to. Like, you can, you're a talented guy, you can find anything you want, you can. And then he said something like, but I know that you have grand goals and dreams and whatever, and one day you're gonna want to do your own thing, and like you're gonna get stuck in the same ways doing that you are doing this. And I was like, really? And now I'm doing my own thing. I'm like, yeah. It's really,
Same stuff.
there's no escaping the you might think that you're getting away from a problem, and in a sense maybe, but like the problem is with
Momentarily.
the pebble is in your shoe, right? It's not the road.
And just because you shook your shoe so that it
Yeah.
moved to a place where you're not stepping on it doesn't mean it's
Yeah.
still not
Yeah,
there.
you have to do the work. Yeah.
Yeah, once you start climbing again, it's going to move, and it's going to be, I always say to people, like, look, you could have this breakthrough right now, or you could have it in a few years, but I promise you it's going to feel exactly the same way.
Yeah.
You're going to have all the same, like, but this is different. And it's like, no, like, go avoid it, but it's going to come back louder, like a 2x4 to your face, because that's the way life works. Like, you want, if you want, because it's because you want something, it's because you're here on the planet, like, for something, and there's stuff you want, but then when you get it, you're like, but not like that though.
Yeah, and another kind of insight I saw was something like, you only get the problems that are yours, in the sense that, okay, so there are problems, so there's all kinds of problems, right? And some problems you can see, and you can see it, so you avoid it. You're like, no, I'm not gonna have that problem, and so you avoid it. And some problems you can deal with. You're like, oh, there's a problem there, I know how to fix it, I'm gonna fix it, and then I'm whatever. So it's like, if you imagine them as like potholes or whatever, you avoid the potholes that you can, and you get out of the potholes that you can. So inevitably, at any point in time, when you're in a pothole or you're in a problem, it's because you couldn't see it or you couldn't deal with it. So it's like, when you zoom out, it's like life is just a history of problems that you don't know how to deal with or you can't see. And so at any given point in time, you're always like, it's like, there's another way of framing it, which is like, the puddle is always perfectly sized for the water in it. Like, because it's like, so the obstacle is the way. And like, and then because I and this was really like a relief valve for me, because I remember being so anxious about I think after I got married and I got a job, and I'm like, oh my god, adulthood, responsibility, bills. And then like, I just kind of realized that it's normal to have concerns, but it's not necessary to kind of freak out about it to the degree that I was freaking out about it. Because it's like, even if I solve these problems, like, then you just, which is a good thing to do, to solve your problems, you expand your capability and you can help more people and blah blah blah. But like, your life is always gonna be defined by the things that are rubbing up against you. It's very profound when you realize, it's like, you're always gonna have your skin at your end of your thing, right? And so you're always like aware of where the walls are and what you're pressing up against. And even if you expand it, like, it's really like the realization that there's no escaping constraints, there's no escaping tension, there's no escaping, like, it's how you surf it. It's like how you kind of navigate it. It goes back to the music thing as well. It's like, you can't avoid problems, you can only kind of handle them as best as you can.
Oh yeah, when you were talking about that, I remembered I saw Regina Spektor. Do you know Regina Spektor?
Oh, nice. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I saw her twice because she opened up a second show, and I was like, I'm going again.
Yeah.
It was so good. But she has this one song that I've covered. It's called Consequence of Sound. It's not really on, I don't know, I have trouble finding it online, but it's this really bizarre, like, fast, almost like a rap kind of song. And she forgot the words. And she kept forgetting the words. So she just like, you're all going to sing it. Ready? And then she just played piano, and the whole audience, I have chills thinking about this.
Nice.
At a venue in New York, at a really, I can't remember which one, but it was a really cool venue. And we all just like perfectly did the song together. Nice. And I will never forget that moment. And she was so cute. She was just like giggling, like she's like so embarrassed, but she was like, whatever, you all have my back. Let's do it. And I just admire that. So I really take cues from people like that and watch what they do. I'm like, that's who I want to be on stage.
Yeah.
I want to roll with it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's a kind of transition point where you realize that you can't be, there's always some part of you that's like, I want to show off how cool I am and how
Exactly.
good I look and how good I
Definitely.
sound. But like that's not your job. That's like that is one, it's a fair, it's a part of the team, right? It's a part of it's one of the things that brought you there. But like the show is the point, and the show is not a one-way thing. The show is a dialogue, right?
Yeah.
And you can involve people.
Yeah, I prefer that. I prefer when the person on stage is they're not hiding in plain sight. They're allowing themselves to be completely seen, and like that's the whole point.
Yeah.
But it's scary. It's definitely I've gotten very used to performing for a camera because of YouTube, but then being up in front of people is a whole other. Like, you have to just decide. Oh, this is the relationship now. It's not a lens. This is real time reaction, which comes with lots of body sensations and thoughts and feelings and things. And, you have to learn how to be with that and expand your capacity to be with all of those sensations. Because then they don't take you over.
One of my favorite insights about stand-up comedy is that a thing that comedians actually often have to learn is to let the audience laugh. And you think that, like if you think like, you tell a joke, like people are going to laugh. But what happens very often is you're so anxious to get through your material. The laugh starts and then you're like, okay, next joke. But like you should let them, there's an ebb and flow to the way the laughter goes, and you got to let them laugh. And then there's like timing, right? There's the right moment to insert the next phrase and so on.
Everything in comedy is timing.
Yeah.
And good timing. Oh, I love good timing on people.
Oh, that's what's the difference between a good joke and a bad joke timing?
What?
No, so the joke is that you get the timing all the way to the end. Oh. Yeah, I didn't do it right, but it's a very you gotta think of that. There's many different ways to deliver the joke. What's the difference between a good joke and a bad joke timing? What? You gotta think. So anyway, that's my kind of weird humor.
I like that too. I like a lot of humor that isn't caught by most people. I tend to enjoy comedians that most people don't get because they aren't doing, I don't know, just like the mainstream easy thing, like they're taking risks. I have a friend, his name is Michael Fisher. He goes by Fish. And when he was starting out in stand-up, he would email me all of his stuff and we go back and forth about it. And there was this one time he told me, he's like, I'm going to try this joke out tonight. And I was like, okay, I'm going to come because, so I'll tell his joke because it's so good. He goes up, he has 5 minutes. It's one of those dive bar, you have 5 minutes. And he goes up and he says, all right, I need an audience participant for the joke that I'm going to do. So someone comes up and he's like, okay, so you're me and I'm going to do an impression of my dad. The guy's like, okay. And then he puts the microphone down and he leaves. And when I say he leaves, I mean, he left the bar.
The building. Right.
He left completely. He wasn't like waiting outside or something. Right. He left. And I was just sitting in the audience watching everyone, their reactions. Like people started laughing uncomfortably. It went on for the entire, the length of what his set would have been. So a full 5 minutes. And eventually the guy who's standing on stage from the audience just goes, well, I guess he's not coming back. And everyone lost it. And it's like, that's such a risky thing to do.
Right.
I mean, marginally, right? Because you left. Yeah. So if it went badly, you didn't have to see it. But later he's like, how'd it go? It went so well.
Right.
I repeat that one to everybody all the time.
When I hear this story, it reminds me of a conversation I've been having with another one of my friends, Ronan. And it's about, so in a sense, he invited you, right? So in a sense, it's like, even if nobody else got it, at least he would have trusted that you would have got it. Right. And there's this sense of there's a few ways of thinking about performance, and part of it is performing for just the crowd in general. And there's the other sense of performing for something sublime, right? Like, so maybe back in the day, people would say, I make my art for the glory of God, right? And I feel like even though I'm not religious, I relate to that in a sense. And it's like, sometimes you need to make the joke or you make the song or make the tweet even, not because you want to please people, but because it had to be done. Like it
Yeah.
wanted to come into existence through you, and there's that. And that can be hard to explain. But if you have at least some peers who get it better than like the mainstream audience, then it's like, if I can make like my 5 friends who I admire and trust very much, if I can impress them, it doesn't matter if like 1,000 people don't get it. If they get it, it's like, it's for them.
I tagged you in something about that because someone was like, there's that one person on Twitter who, if they like your tweet and no one else does, you feel like I did it. And I was like, oh yeah, that's Visa for me. Like, because if I post something and then you like it, I'm like, I don't even have to check I'm not even checking my mentions. That was a good one, you know, because you have taste. Back to the taste thing. I know that you have taste.
Right.
Like I've witnessed it. So like your taste matters because you don't just like every single thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're discerning, which is very cool. I just also remembered that you've been playing guitar.
Mm-hmm.
What the deal? Have you been playing for a long time, or I can't remember what you're doing with that?
I mean, so I used to play in a band when I was about. My family has no musical background whatsoever, or dance, or what. They're a very non-expressive family. But when I was a teenager, when I was in secondary school, so when I was about 13 or 14, the older guys who were like 15 and 16, there were a bunch of cool dudes who used to hang around playing music, and I thought they were cool and I wanted to hang out with them. And they were into like metal and like 90s pop rock, Oasis kind of stuff. And I just wanted to play in a band, I guess. And also, I guess, like mid 16, 17-year-old teenage years, it's like angsty time and music just hits harder then. And yeah, so I formed a band, and music for me was my. So I've written a whole novel about this, right? It's a draft, but like it was my first experience of so many things, of communion, of a chosen family, of self-expression, of participating in something greater than yourself. It was like my church in a sense, right? Like all these other ratty musicians. And we live in Singapore, which is like, so Singapore is like a place that, you know, the general stereotypes is that Singapore is like sterile and soulless and boring. And we do have this like dingy small music scene that like nobody cares about except us. And it felt very precious and real. And yeah, so for me, music was that. I remember when I was playing in a band, at some point I had dreams of being like a rock star, as one does. But I do remember I would organize gigs myself and I would invite other people to play and stuff. And I remember once I witnessed another band playing, and they were slightly older guys. We were about 17 and they were maybe in their mid-20s then. And they were so, like, the thing that we've been describing so far is that they were so they lost themselves beautifully in their performance. Like they were really just with it. They were not self-conscious. They were kind of just, it's one of those magical sets. And I witnessed that. I'm like, I don't have that. I mean, and now that I'm older, I think I could have that. But at that time, I'm like, I haven't been able to do that much, if ever. And so I'm probably never going to be like an A++ musician. I've changed my mind about how I think about those things. I think I was thinking about that in an overly binary sense back then. But, and, so music is still a big part of my life. Not necessarily a big part of my life, but it's always a part of my life. I always have a guitar lying around. I'm always noodling on it from time to time. I anticipate that, at some point, maybe next year, maybe I don't know when it'll happen, but I will get into a mood and I'm like, I'm going to have to write an album of songs and record it. Maybe. Like I have that. And, when I fantasize about being an old man, I'm like, I want to play in a jazz bar with a bunch of oldies from go to some random place in Spain and like just join like that. It's like a global club, right? Like sometimes when I go to, when my wife and I were in Thailand and I'm sitting in my hotel room and I can hear there's a band down the street playing like Guns N' Roses. And I'm like, I don't know those guys, but we listen to the same songs, right? We play the same, we are part of that brotherhood of men.
Yeah.
And so music for me has always been that. And lately I've been enjoying approaching the instrument with a lot of playful screwing around. So I used to try and learn it I would Google for how to play guitar and read tabs and feel guilty about not knowing music theory and a bunch of stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I used to feel very bad about making mistakes. I think that was I want to get better, but when I make mistakes, I feel bad, and then I kind of don't make much progress. But now I've been making quite a bit of progress by learning to appreciate the mistakes as like calibration points. Like, I'm trying to improve like my ear to finger connection on the guitar, and like every time so I try to play songs by ear, and when I get it wrong, I'm like, oh, okay, like, and I'm trying to figure it out. And that has been, it's like I would say music and sports, but for me it's really music. Are ways that, there are games that we play that teach us how to be, right? Like, and yeah, by learning how to be kinder to myself and more curious about my mistakes on the instrument, like that then generalizes to, oh, it's everything. Everything you do in music is about everything. How to play with other people, how to make other people sound good.
I've done covers for most of my life and try to sound like the person singing the song. And then, that's a struggle. And also you won't sing correctly if you're trying to sound like the person, because you're not singing like you. And no one told me that until I found a YouTube video about it. So like, most of my life, YouTube didn't exist and I didn't know that.
Right.
But now I've settled, mostly from being in bands, and doing some original music or doing covers that I'm really like, I'm releasing myself from the way it sounded and doing it however I want to do it. That directly correlates to me being able to own my authentic voice in the world.
Nice.
So when people that I know have trouble with singing, and maybe they ask me for support, or they're scared to get their voice out there, the across the board thing about all those people is that they struggle with their voice in general. Right. So it seems counterintuitive, but I'm like, if you want to get better at singing, maybe try therapy, maybe try coaching, like go right, get some growth and some new awareness of yourself in another arena, and then bring it here, because it will make a huge difference, because it has for me. And I'm doing this thing right now where I show a video of me singing 10 years ago and then me redoing the same song now. Right. And the big difference is who I'm being. It's not my range, I just have more power and control over it now.
I have a tweet that's something like, every single one of my issues as a musician perfectly mirrors every single one of my issues as a person. Like, I play too fast, I don't listen closely enough, I interrupt people a lot, like it's all the same problems, So it's like, if you can find a way to solve the problems in music practice, then it solves that. And if you can find a way to listen to people more, then it comes.
Yep, it's either one. Pick one. It'll definitely go back. So let's see. Oh, I wanted to say I have a dry erase board because we both have ADHD, and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to remember stuff I want to say to you. I had a revelation at the beginning that I need to do an intro for this podcast, and I'm like, how do I talk about you? But I think I've just decided that you're a creator, period.
Right.
And if anything, if I have to label you in some way, you're a creator of communities. Ideas, and ideas. Just making notes. I'm gonna forget everything I'm saying. Awesome. But that's really what I see, and I think people should follow you. Any creator, and I don't care if you don't have a Twitter account, go get one. You should follow him because you talk about your stuckness. When you get stuck, like the other day you were having trouble getting to your ebook, and you're like, I'd rather play guitar right now, or like whatever you'd rather do than work on your book. And I think it's good to see people in their process and remember, like, oh, everybody's dealing with the same stuff. I'm not a snowflake.
Right.
It's not interesting that I'm stuck. It's just,
oh man, like a couple of weeks ago, so I have people that I admire who at some level I'm like, oh my god, they're so much more with it than me. And there was this lady, she was telling me, she was tweeting that she wants to do some journaling stuff for, like, because I think her husband's traveling for work, and like they're separated because of quarantine and just a bunch of stuff. And so she was saying she's feeling like doing some introspection stuff. And I was like, oh, I know a bunch of stuff about that. Like, I'm literally writing a book about it right now. And so I tweeted her about it, and she's like, oh, want to get on a call? I'm like, me? And she's like, I'm like, yeah, okay. And then we chatted, and she like so quickly opened up to me about her anxiety and her insomnia and like not feeling good enough. I'm like, but you're you. You're this, like everyone else, sure, but like you are
Right.
this person who's so with it and so everything. I mean, I didn't say that out loud, but I'm like, oh shit, like if she is dealing with that, then it's everyone. It's everyone all the way.
Everyone.
Like,
In fact, I would even venture to say that the people who are the most prolific, who have done the most, struggle
mhm,
the most.
mhm,
Because I like
mm,
people who are without obstacle, like people who
right.
have maybe not endured anything very difficult in their lives for whatever
Mhm,
reason. It's been relatively easy and nice. Nothing has tragically happened to them. They haven't had a lot of trauma,
mm,
or they have and they are in denial about it.
right.
So people who are kind of cut off from struggle and just abstain from it and find ways of like numbing to it and not even thinking about it usually aren't creating very much.
Yeah.
Like they're kind of hanging out, and I refuse when people are like, I'm not a creative person. I'm like, well, that's some
Yeah.
bullshit.
Yeah.
That's bullshit, because go
Yeah.
back to childhood, everyone
Yeah.
is creative,
Yeah.
and the extent to which you practice that or
Right.
risk something by saying, I will now create a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That doesn't define how creative you are. Everyone
Yeah.
is inherently creative, I think.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, I can talk about that for hours. I had one thing I just wanted to say though. Oh yeah, there's a David Bowie quote from an interview that I watched on a plane once, where the interviewer is asking David Bowie, does it ever get to you, all the criticism? And the way he said it, I really felt that the interviewer was expecting I'm a hater's gonna hate. I was like the interviewer was expecting that,
Yeah.
but David was just kind of sitting there looking at him like super earnestly, and he said, yes, it does. It hurts me very deeply. I'm a very sensitive person. And like the interviewer was like, oh.
They don't know
And
what to do with that.
yeah. And I'm like, that was profound for me, because I feel like, I mean, different people may have different assessments about different artists at different points in their trajectories. But like, there are some artists who seem to manage to be creative throughout. And then there are some who seem to have like a great phase at some point, but then there's something that kind of tarnishes or like, I think when Steve Jobs was talking about Bob Dylan, he was saying that he was afraid to meet Dylan because what if Dylan had already crossed that threshold and is now like a caricature of himself? You're just playing your hits and you're no longer taking risks and stuff like that. And I think what does happen is when you get successful and you start getting bombarded with the crazy fans, crazy haters, crazy everything, there is a temptation to turn down your sensitivity and kind of get cold to everything and just develop like this like there's a bunch of different ways you could do it, but like it was the part where I was witnessing David kind of saying, I'm a very sensitive person. I'm like, fuck, that's who I want to be. I want to be heartbroken at all the way, like till the end. And an artist who's doing it now that I admire is Hayley Williams from Paramore.
I love her.
Her solo album is called Petals for Armor, which is like, again, it's like a one phrase gunshot to the chest, right? It's like, it's saying that I'm choosing to be vulnerable even though it hurts. Like, that's like real strength.
Oh, that's so good. It is real strength. It's funny too, because when I'm honest about stuff bothering me, people try and talk me out of having it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why do you care? Why do you care? Oh, I'm like, okay, I guess I won't tell you. It's like I'm very sensitive, and there's a lot of things that people could say to me that trigger something from my childhood, and I'm very aware of what it is. It doesn't mean that the reaction doesn't happen.
Sensitivity is the thing that is most kind of misappreciated. So like I have this theory of masculinity, but it's for women as well. It's just this way of being, which is that you have to be sensitive, you have to be smart, and you have to be strong. And each of these things, sensitivity is about being able to receive inputs from reality, like being able to perceive and know what's going on. Smarts is being able to process that information that you've received to understand what's going on. And then strength is being able to act on it, to do something, right? And now we have these cults, or we have these like cargo cults kind of like worshipping. We have people who worship strength excessively. They're like, oh, might is right. Whoever is powerful and strong and whatever, like those are my heroes. And then you have people who kind of smart. So like, oh, this person is so intelligent, like everything they do is like what they can do no wrong because they're so smart. Like we should be ruled by, like hyper intelligent people. But you very seldom see people appreciate sensitivity in the same way. And it's crazy because it's the most foundational thing. Like if you don't have that sensitivity, then if you're smart, you might be processing the wrong information, come to the wrong conclusions, and then do the wrong thing, and then hurt people and hurt yourself and whatever. So it's like sensitivity is really the most important. I mean, they're all equally important, but it's the most underappreciated thing that is valuable. Which is like, again, it drives me nuts. It's like, how do people live?
Yeah. How do you live with that? I mean, I guess you just learn. You learn to. I'm having like just a moment of feeling very validated by that idea because I still often think there's something wrong with the fact.
We so often punish people. We're like, oh, like why are you so sensitive? Like that itself is an insult. Like, why are you so sensitive? And there are ways, there are ways in which all three of those things can kind of turn in on itself. And like, have you watched Man of Steel, the Superman movie from so there's a scene, there's an ADHD metaphor in Man of Steel.
Really? Please.
I have a tweet with a video of it. I'll send it to you later. But it's like there's this scene where Clark Kent is a young boy in a classroom and his powers are just starting to come in and he's just overwhelmed. He's like, he sees the clock and he hears the teacher's heartbeat and he's freaking the fuck out. And then he runs and hides in a closet. And they have to get his mom to come and get him. And his mom is like, focus on my voice, listen to, because he's like, overwhelmed but super senses, right? And like, it's like in that scene, you can, it's such a great metaphor for, you can see how like when you tell someone Superman has super senses, you're like, oh yeah, that's cool. That's a good thing that he has, like it's powerful. And and sometimes he freaks the fuck out because of it, because he gets overwhelmed by And then you're like, imagine asking Superman, like, why are you so sensitive? Right? It's just but you get it, right? It's just funny. It's funny that we don't understand how it is.
I think we're just scared of our own emotions. I think we're just
So there's this whole school of kind of adulthood, maturity, whatever that is. When you grow up, you learn to put your feelings in a box and then that's it. Like you stop. You like the solution to being sensitive is be less sensitive, like put on sunglasses so you're not blinded by the light or whatever. And sometimes it's helpful to know these tactics to kind of temporarily get away from crazy shit. But like the world is a crazy place, and
you can't really protect yourself
about it.
Well, and then you're missing the show, like the musician on stage who is trying not to be on stage. It's like you're gonna miss life. So we're almost done, and I was going to ask you, I've been asking everyone, like, what bullshit are you still on? But I don't really think that, I mean, you reveal your bullshit all the time. Like you kind of
But talk. I still do have stuff.
Yeah.
And the fastest way for me to identify my bullshit is that, I'm pretty good at helping my friends with it. So I use quote tweets a lot, right? So like I quote tweet my old stuff at other people. And like I can see, I have old threads where I'm like, oh, why is Visa so loud? And it's just things like so the current bullshit that I'm on is that I am just being really slow about, see, I can't even look at you when I'm saying this, isn't it funny? I'm being really slow about like confronting my perfectionism about the ebook that I'm currently working on. It's like I know that it's already good. I mean, so it's a bit of a mess right now because my creative process is that like I throw everything I like dump out all the Lego and then I piece stuff together, and then you do have to clear away the rest of the Lego so that it's not chaos for people. But like I haven't done the clearing yet because I'm still kind of I'm still attached to the idea that I can make it better than it currently is. But the truth is that I've crossed some threshold and I'm in denial about that when I should just ship it. And I realized the thing is that I'm so afraid of 1 in 1,000 people saying this sucks that I have been depriving a couple of hundred people at least of something that will be helpful to them. And I have been trying to not face that because I'm so afraid of 1 in 1,000 people saying this sucks. But actually, when I say it out loud, I'm like, yeah, fuck that guy. Fuck that imaginary asshole in my head who's a simulation of a troll who doesn't know me. That is causing me to deprive the people who care about my work, right? But that is, I find it very helpful always for me to reframe things in terms of my friends, like service to my
Yeah,
friends. Like
yeah.
so like even me, I used to hate asking for money. I still don't like it. I have a Patreon, and like I don't like shilling my stuff. But like, if it's about me and I'm like, is it all like, am I, you get it? But like, when I reframe it as the good that I can do for other people is constrained by my refusal to confront these issues, then it becomes like, oh, okay, like that's the trade-off that my poor little me problems are. I mean, you get it. It's like I don't want to kind of inflate my problems to make them huge, and I don't want to diminish them to the point where I dismiss them entirely and being mean to myself. But like when I realize, like when I'm kind of fixated on my own issues without thinking about like how it may affect other people, then because I still have this historical baggage or whatever of like, mostly I diminish myself, I guess. But when I think about the people that I can help, like that tends to pull me out of the pit.
Yeah, it's a good tool. It's good to have. This is why it's great to be like have something at risk and have an audience and have people, because a lot of people help others and not themselves, and that's sort of a crutch. But I like to take crutches and turn them into strengths, and so like taking the crutch of wanting to help other people and using it as something to get past your own bullshit.
Yeah,
It's definitely, and I guess you have to value your stuff enough to know that it's going to make an impact. But like anyone creating anything, I think has an impact on at least one person that they know, and I think that's enough. One's enough, and if no one else, you for sure, like it's gonna have an impact on you because you're gonna finish the thing, and that's gonna change your opinion of yourself.
Yes.
A little bit. So when's the book gonna come out? When's the new?
Definitely this year. Hopefully, now it's November 30, so it's not gonna happen tomorrow, but like in the next week or so.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and then I know that that's happening. And so as we wrap, we might have just said it, but let's see if something different comes out. What advice do you have for somebody who's on their bullshit right now?
Okay. I like to try and be as real as I can in the moment. Someone who is on their bullshit right now. So the thing that has been my latest kind of kick is when everything's kind of chaotic and messy, ask yourself, what do you love? What do you really, really love? Like, like so much of Twitter and so much of like people are so fixated on what they don't like, what they think is bad, what they think is. And when you get caught up in your bullshit, it's like, oh, even with myself, I just said that I'm so fixated on an imaginary 1 in 1,000 guy saying that they don't like my stuff, and that will invalidate me as a creator. And oh no, I'm now. But what do I love? I love being able to make a difference to people. I love being able to and you should be very, very specific about this. Like someone DM'd me recently and they're like, you helped me with a thing that is like, nobody else seems to be talking about this in this way. And like, so the more precise you can get about what exactly you love and why you love it and how you're going to serve that thing that you love, then it's like, like one way of like oversimplifying the world that's a useful oversimplification from time to time is that everything is just love and fear, right? So like the things that there are things that you want to do or you try to be because of love, and then there are things that because of fear you avoid, and you invent bullshit and whatever. And it can be helpful to articulate what your fears are, but like the reason to keep fighting or the reason to kind of pursue a thing despite your fear is that there's something precious worth fighting for, and that is what you love. And so you should think about what you love and honor that. And the process of honoring what you truly love it's like just think of your favorite metaphor for like a back massage or like a hot shower or whatever it is that's like for the soul, right? Like a back massage and a hot shower for the soul, like just doing what you love and serving what you love.
That's beautiful. Beautiful note to end on. I'm going to have you on again because I feel like we could go for a while.
For sure.
And I have another guest that's going to call in sooner. I would just keep going. But thank you so much, Visa. This is awesome. It's so good to know you. And I'm really, really grateful to have gotten to share you with, the people. Next time I'll ask them what they want me to ask you, because that would probably be fun.
Awesome. Beautiful.
All right. Well, get some sleep eventually.
Yeah,
Thanks, man.
I will. Thank you.
Break up